These folks have no debt. They've saved plenty of money. They've gotten their Social Security dialed in. And the problem wasn't money. It was life. Financial planning software answers usually just one question and one question only. Can you retire? But what it doesn't ask is a more important question. What are you retiring into? Retirement solved the financial problem, but it didn't solve the life problem. So if all we do is focus on the numbers, we can end up financially ready, but we could also end up personally miserable. Hello and welcome back to Retire Stronger, episode 47. My name is John Ford. I am the co-founder of Crown Advisors and co-host of this podcast. And with me today is Bill Kearney. Bill, welcome back. Say hello to everyone.
Hey, John. Hello, everyone. Hope everybody's doing good today.
Absolutely, man. It's good to be back with you. So today we're going to talk about an interesting topic. And I think it's a topic that a lot of soon-to-be retirees or individuals that are saving for retirement on a very consistent and diligent basis, a lot of times don't really think about. So, folks, if you're in your 40s or you're about to retire, I truly believe this episode is for you, especially if you have not retired yet, because you have time to think about a lot of the things we're going to discuss today. And folks, we've worked with a lot of people who have retired successfully and, quite frankly, got into retirement and were a little bit unhappy. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. These folks have no debt. They've saved plenty of money. They've gotten their Social Security dialed in. And the problem wasn't money. It was life. And, Bill, I know you and I both say this a lot, that financial planning software answers usually just one question and one question only. Can you retire? But what it doesn't ask is a more important question. What are you retiring into? Retirement solved the financial problem, but it didn't solve the life problem. And I know, Bill, you agree with that, right? But why do people get this so wrong? Why, I guess, another way of asking this question, Bill, is, why do smart, disciplined people fall into this trap? And I think a lot of it comes down to that, I don't know if we're trained consciously or subconsciously to chase a finish line or to chase a specific number, the probability of success, which is a lot of what financial planning software gets into, saving, accumulating, optimizing. Those things are easy to measure. And we assume that life just fills in when work stops. But a lot of retirees find that to not be the case. So let's dive in. Let's talk about, what work provides before you retire and some of the things you can think about before retiring to make sure that what you've worked so hard for allows you to have a fulfilling life after work. Because work provides you with structure, right, Bill? I mean, you go to work from 9 to 5 every day. You're consciously or, subconsciously, you're just flowing right along with putting money into your 401k every week or every month, however often you get paid. So you have that structure. You have those relationships every day. You go to work, you see the same people, usually every day at work, you have the same relationships, and you have a purpose. You have a purpose for why you get up every day for your 9 to 5 job. And when those things stop, like when you retire, you're no longer going to work, that structure doesn't quite exist like it used to. A lot of those relationships are no more because you're not seeing these same people like you used to. And you don't necessarily have a fixed purpose for what you do when you get up every day. So if all we do is focus on the numbers, we can end up financially ready, but we could also end up personally miserable. Bill, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, John, this is interesting because I think over the last couple of years, we've run into people. We have had the occasion of working with people who have actually already been in retirement for a period of time. And they come to us and they talk about how they are bored.
Yes.
And they want help with their boredom in retirement, which the first time I heard that, was very interesting, and I felt a bit inadequate on how to fix this. But what we've uncovered, I think, and what is happening here for a number of folks is they fall into the trap of the honeymoon phase. And by honeymoon phase, I'm not referring to when you got married. I'm referring to actually the honeymoon phase of when you first start retirement.
Yes.
And so I'm going to give you an example here, just a case study of one. I take a number of folks where this has happened to, but this is Mark's story. Okay, Mark came to us after a period of time already being in retirement. He retired at age 62 and had a $2 million portfolio, pension, strong Social Security. On paper, this guy's perfect as far as retirement. He did it. He made it. He achieved what he wanted to. He was able to retire. And so for the first 6 months, he relayed to us that his plan and what he had, his ideal retirement plan was just to rest and to travel and to catch up on all the things that he had missed out on, or that he felt he missed out on while he was working. And then after about 6 or 8 months, the reality kind of set in. That routine that he was used to working all of those years wasn't there. The days sort of began to blur together. It was almost like he didn't know what day it was during the week. He had a number of friends who were still working and probably were going to be working for a number of years beyond this. No real reason to get excited about the day. He had no purpose. And so this is when what happened here is the vacation phase ends. We often like to comment with people that we don't really feel like, I know, John, I've heard you say this a lot, I don't expect you're going to sit on a beach for the next 35 years.
Right.
Now, I mean, if you've ever gone to Key West, Florida, I was there recently. There are folks there who look like they have sat on a beach for 35 years consistently. Yes. No offense to them. And some people, that is ideally what they want to do. But for most people, there is purpose that is needed in retirement. And I think what happened to Mark in this instance was he retired from something, but he had no idea what he was retiring to. He had no purpose in his retirement. So this is something that's starting to happen with folks who have prepared, have accumulated, have done really well during the accumulation phase, during the working phase, but they really haven't considered what it is they are actually going to retire to. And I think this is a bit of a myth about retirement that is becoming more and more common. Would you agree, John?
Oh, 100%. And I know you're going to dive a little more into that.
Oh, as far as the myth that we're buying into here?
Yes.
Yeah. It's, so you've often heard me say, and even on this podcast, that I think people have the lawnmower number in their head, right? They've got that number where they just look up in the sky and they're like, it's the number I've got to get to. And when I hit that number, I can retire. And that becomes the sole focus. That becomes the myth that they buy into, is that I just need to get to that number and then I can retire, without thinking a step beyond that to say, well, what do I want to actually do? What am I retiring to? So we see this a lot in the media and the way this is marketed to us from financial companies, right? Stop working and by default, your life is going to become fun, right? Money is supposed to be the fuel for the journey, right? Not the pursuit. So I think there might need to be a little bit of a reframe here, such that like money really should support, if you want to make money the fuel for your journey through life, then money should support the relationships that you have. Money should be there to help provide you with the health that you need in retirement, to provide you with adventure, for the things that you want to give to, right? The things that provide purpose and meaning in your life. And I think that when money becomes the point, retirement generally always becomes disappointing to people. If it's just about getting to a goal line, if it's just about getting to a number, and there isn't a real purpose behind what you're going to do when you get there, you're going to find a certain level of disappointment in what you see.
Oh, yeah. And I would say, to add on to that, there's, you and I were talking through this, and we kind of came up with 3 kind of larger themes around the invisible risks of a successful retirement. And I think the first one is exactly what you were kind of talking about just now, is is that identity shock, right? Not really knowing who they are supposed to be once they cross that finish line and get into retirement. Like, what do you do? Disappears kind of almost overnight, right? You go from working full time to no longer working, and your identity kind of goes away. Your title goes away. You're no longer the CEO or the executive vice president or the national sales director or whatever title you had. So, if work was your identity, retirement forces the question, who am I now? And that's something that I think everyone needs to really think about. Who are you going to be in retirement? And then the second theme of kind of an invisible risk to a successful retirement is the burden of time. Folks, more time does not equal more freedom. Without that structure you mentioned, your days blur together. Sometimes things can feel aimless, like you don't really have a point to what you're doing. So, another way of saying this is kind of like freedom without direction doesn't really feel like freedom. So, again, folks, this doesn't apply to everyone. I'll use my own mom as a great example. She worked for 40 years as a school teacher, retired successfully, wonderfully. I'm glad for her for that. And I will tell you that I probably see her less now that she's retired and has been for a few years. Probably see her less now than I ever did when she was working, because she has found purpose. She has gone out and filled her days with meaning. And I think that's wonderful. But this doesn't apply to everyone. A lot of times it disproportionately impacts and affects high achievers, disciplined savers, people whose identity was tied to productivity. And that can be a problem. And if you haven't figured out how you're going to handle that in retirement, well, that can be an issue for you. You also have the third kind of, invisible risk, as we're calling it, of relationship risk. Two people, two visions of retirement. You've got, we've heard horror stories, Bill. We have a client that hired us who ended up getting divorced when they retired because the husband happened to be his job required him to travel 3 to 4 days of every week. So he was hardly ever home throughout his entire career. He crossed that finish line, retired. All of a sudden, he's home all the time, 24/7, togetherness, right? It can be harder than expected. Travel versus rest. These are things that can strain a relationship. Adventure. Going out and trying new things, creating a different lifestyle than what you had prior to retiring. That can cause issues. So adventure versus simplicity, as kind of what we've dubbed it as. These things are not money problems, Bill. The issue, though, that I think a lot of the folks that we've helped experience or get through these issues is that they're not money problems, but money won't fix them, right? So what do we do, Bill? How do we address this?
Well, I just was thinking as you were talking there, I think maybe one thing you might want to add to your 5 years out towards retirement plan is start taking some trips to figure out if you still like each other. Is that what I'm hearing? Like, you better make sure you're going to be able to get along in retirement, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think we might want to consider adding that to the recommendations.
Yeah. And again, folks, we're not saying this happens to everyone, but it can. And it's something to think about, right?
Especially if you travel a lot, apparently. And I think too, stress testing on portfolios is a big part of this, right? We focus a lot in our industry. We focus a lot on taking a look at somebody's portfolio and figuring out how it's going to work from a numbers standpoint through retirement. Is it going to work? Are we coming up short? How do we optimize? Can we come up with more money if we do Roth conversions? Check the box. We did a Roth conversion conversation for this episode. How does the portfolio actually work on a stress test? And we typically look at things like market downturns. What happens if a spouse passes away early? How is inflation going to affect the portfolio? What happens if I experience a period of time with lower returns? That's the typical stress testing that happens in a portfolio, in a plan. And there's nothing wrong necessarily with doing it that way. But I think there's a missing piece here, some components you might want to add to the stress test, which is what happens if retirement needs to start tomorrow? What happens if you become disabled, maybe cognitively, physically, where Work is gone. And that's the only change that happens necessarily, right? If that were to happen, even if there wasn't a physical or mental reason to stop working, if you took work away tomorrow, what is it that's going to excite you? Who are you with? Who do you want to spend the time with? Right? What gives your day meaning? Those are the things you want to start to think about as you approach retirement, so that it's not the first time you think about this is when you're in retirement, right? It doesn't need to be a complicated conversation. You just need to come to this with some intentionality, right? Think through, what are the things that drive you? Maybe there are passions or hobbies or things that you've wanted to do for a number of years that you haven't had the time to do. Maybe it's time to start exploring those and figure out where those are going to fill in. Maybe you are mission driven in your faith, and this will give you the opportunity to better serve in those areas. Start thinking about those things sooner rather than later. Just come to this with some intentionality, and it will help you be successful. It does not need to be complicated.
Oh, I agree. And to that point, you and I were talking through this and came up with 4 areas and ideas of having a fulfilling retirement outside of the financial piece, right? And I know that you were just kind of starting to hit on the one I wanted to kind of go through, which is having a purpose, not productivity, not trying to find a second job or part-time job just to keep yourself busy, but like what you're going to do to contribute to your own personal life outside of work, your contribution to society, as you started to talk about, like volunteering and mentoring, maybe teaching or giving, like your charitable giving efforts and things of that nature. You have decades of experience that you just walked away from, to retire. Don't waste that. Use it for something that gives some additional purpose and meaning in your life. I would say the second area that we wanted to kind of hit on was having a lighter structure, right? A routine is not a bad thing, but rigidity can create issues, right? If you're trying to always stick to a very specific schedule during retirement, that can potentially cause issues, right? So these are things you want to think through. Things like going to the gym, being a part of different groups, and maybe starting new hobbies. These are things that can help you prevent kind of a sea of sameness, right? You don't want to have everything be monotonous every single day, right? Bill, any additional thoughts on these different areas that we thought would make a more fulfilling retirement?
I definitely think the light structure part of this is important. I think we are wired in our minds to have some type of structure, and from a cognitive standpoint, it just seems that keeps the mind moving and keeps you productive in those areas. But another way you can do this is through connection. And we've lost so much connection in our society with social media and the ability to just kind of pick up and put down relationships when we feel like it. So actual real human interaction, I can't believe we have to say that, but real human interaction is critical, I think, in all of this. And not just the occasional family visits. Maybe it's maybe you have time now to do the once a week family dinner with your family, and you have the time and the ability to do that now. And well, that's going to spawn connection for everybody, multiple people in your family. That's a wonderful thing. And I would say, look, even if you're the most introverted person out there, everyone needs some level of connection. I think that goes beyond just the retirement part of this. I think that all could be said for most everyone now, but especially in the retirement areas. These are things that you can affect. And then remember, growth. We never stop developing. We never stop growing. Retirement isn't the finish line. Retirement is just a transition point. So it's a great time to maybe try to learn something new, push yourself, maybe move outside of your comfort zone a little bit. I feel like personally, growth fuels satisfaction. When I learn something new, I get a level of satisfaction out of that. That doesn't change just because you hit retirement. We're always growing and changing and developing. Let's make sure we don't stunt our growth in retirement by not thinking through those types of things.
Oh yeah, well said. And folks, we're not trying to say that money doesn't matter and all the things you did throughout your career leading up to retirement, it was pointless and it doesn't matter. That's not the point at all here. Money does matter, but it's not the only point. money should be your support system, right? The fuel to get you to where you want to be to live a fulfilling life in retirement. So think maybe in the terms of shifting your mindset to, from, how much can I make to what kind of life do I want this to support? I'm doing all these things. I'm saving all this money. I'm working hard. I'm being diligent. Why am I doing it? What is the life I'm trying to support and fuel with all of this hard work? So before you ask, can I retire? Ask yourself this: will I like what life looks like on the other side? And folks, if you found this episode at all resonating, or if you found it helpful, please feel free to share this with your family, your friends, your colleagues. Hit that like, subscribe button. Follow us on YouTube and any other medium that our podcast is can be heard on, like Spotify, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Podcasts as well. We're out there on all those different areas. But feel free to hit that like, subscribe button. Give us a call at 704-469-0200 if you have questions or want to chat about your situation. You can always go to our website at www.crownadvisorgroup.com and shoot us an email if you have questions as well. info@crownadvisorgroup.com. For Bill Kearney, I'm John Ford, and we will see you on the next episode.